And so as your team is focused more specifically around mobile programmatic, what are some of the biggest challenges that your team faces day to day?
Absolutely. I think I've heard it as I was traveling through the halls here. I think measurement is one of those dirty words out there that we just haven't really captured. I think reliable measurement is definitely one of those challenges that we constantly run across. I think we need to all think of creative ways to help measure our initiatives, and we've done so with the help of all the data, whether it's location-based or even audience-based, that we actually get passed back to us. From a direct response standpoint, measuring against, different order IDs, for whatever products that we're trying to portray for our clients. From a location standpoint is getting down to the granularity of, is this individual at that particular location? In addition to that, where were they before that? Can we create some sort of causal analysis to map this individual user? So instead of getting them at that location, can we get them before or after and start re-engaging them? And that's how we sort of started to build it into our client strategies, as far as whether or not we can retarget against those type of audience across different devices, which we'll actually talk about in a little bit. In addition to just seeing that audience where they are. I think that's the benefit of mobile and sort of how we started to tackle some of those issues and problems.
Is it hard for you working with some of your clients to sell in the mobile programmatic story? How do you, when you're working with a client, how do you really help them to incorporate mobile programmatic as part of the strategy, and how do you sell that through?
I think, just going back to it, it's about the audience, and thankfully I worked on many clients they're very understanding. This can be a very convoluted space. I think it takes a great mind, and great minds are out there, to help understand the programmatic space and RTB, what RTB actually brings to us. I think from an MEC standpoint, what we take a look at from an RTB standpoint is the notion of private marketplaces. It's a little bit preliminary right now in our space, but we do it across different platforms and trying to identify what type of reliable inventory that we specifically want. And partners like you guys are out there trying to help us identify that and establish those right partnerships. So we are buying a little bit more efficiently with the media dollars that we have.
So there's definitely a lot of buzzwords out there. Programmatic is certainly one of them. Private marketplaces, as you mentioned. I think, can you talk a little bit just specifically on private marketplaces, based on statistics that mobile really is of high interest to clients, but overall activity is still relatively low when it comes to actually executing. Private marketplaces seems like a tactic that is generating a lot of interest. Can you talk specifically just what they are, because some of these folks may not know, and then are you utilizing them today?
Sure. Private marketplaces are unique identifiable inventory sources that you specifically know. A couple of sites that actually come to mind, if you're buying ESPN, that can actually fall into the private marketplace in terms of, how the waterfall sort of takes place in terms of direct buying, secondary buying, private marketplaces, and sort of like the run of inventory that's out there. The advantageous part of private marketplaces is knowing exactly where you're buying. I think it doesn't pose a blind eye in terms of where you're buying, and you actually know. I mean, our clients have been really receptive of it. Mm-hmm. The strategies that we've been using is sort of like reverse mechanism and trying to take a look at how we're buying in the open exchange space. Can we get a little bit more targetable and identifiable, taking into account what we're seeing in the open exchange space, and then trying to apply it to the private marketplace. So our clients have a purview, the senior management over at our clients has a purview exactly where we'll be, and from the agency standpoint, it's a heck of a lot more efficient, and from an operations standpoint as well.
Yeah. Another buzzword that we hear a lot in the industry is data, and I think it'd be really helpful for you to talk to the folks here about how mobile data is unique, and more specifically, how data becomes actionable for your team.
Yeah, absolutely, more than happy to. I say that mobile, it's a great space. Data is definitely one of those dirty words that we actually toss around, and it's just been tossed around so much. I'm sure if everyone had a dime for many times that they heard data today, they would probably walk out here with a few bucks in their pockets. The way we actually take a look at data, it's great that everyone's able to offer data. It's a matter of trying to acknowledge and know exactly what you can do with that data. I'll use a couple of examples. It's great that we have lat-long data out there, and there's different ways of extracting that latitudinal and longitudinal data. But what can you actually do with that? And I think it takes, a couple of steps back. Is like, can I start to identify a consumer if they're at a QSR location? Can I start to identify if they're at a retail footprint? And we've done studies in the past with Millennial that actually showed, like, for example, door open rate studies, where we've taken lat-long data from consumers and sort of applied it to different campaigns, and we've actually showed its proof and worth from an engagement standpoint, as well as tying back, to sales, as far as what media that we actually had put into market and how, all sorts of lat-long data actually plays and helps, measurement on that standpoint.
So what other mobile data outside of location does your team take a hard look at and measure or utilize?
Absolutely, we take a look at behavioral data. I think that's definitely, of that causal analysis that we try to, amplify and do. We, as I mentioned, we take a look at also device ID data, for specific use cases. It's great to see, if you're a tech telco, is someone's device, a couple years old? Are they up for an upgrade? Can we actually use some of that data from extracting from the device to benefit our campaigns? Can we actually use the data if they're on a weaker signal? Can we actually serve them up with something of low resolution, so they're actually experiencing the same format? Can we actually see if they're on Wi-Fi? Can we give them a more advanced, version of our banners? Can we give them a more advanced version of our creative to actually engage with and increase that branding and that awareness?
And so those are all things that you're considering as your team plans mobile campaigns. That was a long list of items.
Absolutely. I mean, anything and everything. It's not just one thing that we take a look at. We take a look at so many things, and it's luckily, like, as a consumer, if you take a look behind us, we leave behind so much of a digital footprint that there's just so much data, but we have to also be cautious as marketers and agency folk that we're not having analysis paralysis by all this data that we have out there, and we're actually using it a little bit more wisely.